नमस्कार, खंबागणी, राम राम सा, वणक्कम, आप सभी को ऑल टाइम मीडिया में फिर से स्वागत है. Today we have again Salvatore Babones with us. I don't think so he needs any kind of introduction, especially after meeting Naren Mojidi. He's gone viral on the Indian media. He's already been known with a lot of us nationalists like us, and he has already been on our show previously. So today he's in a hurry, but I'll go rapid fire round. Sir, how was your meeting with Naren Modi?
It was really a wonderful experience. And of course, I feel humbled by having had the opportunity to meet Mr. Modi. I don't think I've really done anything to deserve that. I was quite surprised when I received the invitation. I knew that Mr. Modi and his team were coming to Sydney, and I would not have been surprised to have received an invitation from a member of the Prime Minister's office to meet, one of his assistants in the PMO. To meet Mr. Modi himself really surprised me, and it was really a humbling but gratifying experience. What can I say? It was he was very generous with me, both with his time. He gave me an entire quarter hour, which is a lot of time in a prime minister's schedule. But also with his attention, being interested in what I had to say, asking me questions, wanting to, have my views. And it sounds arrogant even to say it out loud, my advice.
So, like, what questions did he ask you, and what advice did you give him?
Oh, we talked about data. He wanted to know where I got my data, what kind of data I was using to study India, what India could do to get its story out better. There's what kind of data India needed to produce. And a lot of that was his own personal interest. I think it's clear that he is someone who is very numbers driven, very data driven. But also, I had an op-ed in the Australian Financial Review today. And the title of the op-ed was that if Australia's India engagement needs to be driven by data, not drama. And people who look carefully will see in those photos me holding a newspaper, and the newspaper says, the headline says, data, not drama. And he really loved that phrase. He repeated it in English. In our conversation, I spoke in English, he spoke in Hindi, which was then interpreted to me. Occasionally, he would say a few sentences in English, but he reverted to Hindi. But the one phrase he really loved was that data, not drama, from the headline in the newspaper.
Right. So, why is the title "Data, Not Drama"? The Indian-Australian relationship. I will come
because so much of the news coverage about India is driven by people's personal passions, often the passions of people either in the diaspora or people who are activists who do work on or about India. That now the drama is sometimes very positive, as with the big stadium event, and everyone's saying, "Wow, Mr. Modi can draw a big crowd." But often the drama is very negative. That is, it's people wanting to, tell some kind of bad news story or have a complaint or look, in a country of 1.4 billion people, there are many injustices. I mean, even in a country like Australia with 25 million people, there are many injustices, and injustices sell newspapers. So people come to a newspaper with an op-ed saying, my people are being tyrannized, I'm suffering this or that. And I don't want to make light of that. I mean, there are many injustices in the world. But statistically, the consistent quantitative story we have out of India is that these injustices are relatively rare compared to other countries. I mean, I'll just give you one example. Journalists killed in India. Yes, there are journalists killed in India, as there are all over the world. But the rate at which journalists are killed in India is less than 1/3 that in rest of world. It's even 1/3 lower than in the United States. So, journalists are relatively safe in India. In fact, journalists have roughly one quarter the murder rate for journalists as for the general population in India. So this sort of data, we can hear a story like a certain journalist was killed in terrible circumstances, and of course we feel really bad about that. And newspapers love to run with those kind of stories. But when we look at it scientifically and we try to contextualize it using real data on India, the picture is very different.
Right. So, as you've always been focusing on indexes and datas and statistics, so your focus has always been on the real, what exactly is the numbers, which actually reflect the reality. So, how did you find the personality of Narendra Modi ji, if you would like to define his personality when you met him?
So several people have asked me, so I've had the benefit of rehearsal here. I have to say the one word that I keep coming back to is gracious. He was an incredibly gracious person, by which I mean that he didn't have any sense of pomposity or self-importance. He greeted me as a guest, almost, wanting to make me feel comfortable to be there with him. He was very warm. He shook my hand. He even greeted me with a namaskar, which I couldn't. I'm the one saying namaskar, not him, right? So the fact that he was just so gracious in meeting me on equal terms, not as a supplicant, not as someone who wanted favors from him, not just as another individual, and both of us have things to contribute in the world. And yes, he happens to be the prime minister of the world's largest country, and I'm just an associate professor at an ordinary university. That didn't seem to matter. And the discussion we had was, just a frank, open exchange. Well, not even an exchange. He was asking me questions, and he was interested in what I had to say. And
Probably he was trying to
nothing.
absorb like a sponge. He was trying to absorb all the information from you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't use that expression. I mean, I know it's just an expression, but I would say more as, as just a genuinely interested person, and I think if he had met a medical doctor, just as if you or I meet someone who's a heart surgeon, we might be really interested to know, how do you do surgery on a beating heart? How is that possible? What sort of techniques do you use? It was that sort of thing, only instead of talking about heart surgery, we were talking about my own area, which is, the analysis of data about, comparative data about countries. And, he shared a little bit about me, about India's data generation, about the shortcomings in India that he wanted to see rectified. And he asked, what areas could India be producing better data in? And, it really was just it felt like a very genuine discussion of the kind I would have with a peer. Not like I was granted an interview by a Maharaja. Right? There was none of that feel whatsoever, and it really was a very pleasant experience. I wish we could have sat and chatted for an hour or two instead of 15 minutes. As it was, he went well over my allotted 10-minute. I mean, it was at least 15 minutes we were there. I didn't put the stopwatch on. I wasn't allowed to bring in a mobile phone. So, but look, it was just a very pleasant experience.
Very pleasant. So, how would you rate him, or how would you compare him with the other world leaders and Modi's position in global politics?
Yeah. Look, I know this is a highly political question in India, and I don't want to wade into Indian politics. I just want to be, very frank with people here. Today, 2023, Modi stands as a giant astride the global stage. And I know, some Indians will be thrilled to hear me say that. Some Indians will say, Salvatore, you're just dazzled by, the celebrity of having met the prime minister. But, I ask people to look at it systematically. Who else is a political giant in the world? Well, let's dismiss the totalitarians. I mean, Xi Jinping, for all of his power, is not a highly respected political leader. Everyone knows he's the dictator of a totalitarian communist country. Vladimir Putin, dictator of an authoritarian, violent country. Joe Biden, well, he is the president of the United States, but he faces a lot of questions about his competence, a lot of questions about his potential past corrupt dealings. Certainly there are big issues about his family, and whatever you may think about U.S. politics, a cloud hangs over him. Same as over Donald Trump. Again, I don't want to be Democrat or Republican here. Big clouds hang over Donald Trump when you try to think of who would be the world's most respected political leader. If you think in the UK, well, Boris Johnson was many things, but he wasn't highly respected. I don't think anyone would have called Boris Johnson, quote unquote, highly respected. Rishi Sunak is, very junior. Maybe in 10 years, Rishi Sunak will have the same stature as Narendra Modi, but I think no one would put up these two leaders and say that, of the two, Narendra Modi is the junior. Clearly not. The only comparable leader on the world stage really is maybe Angela Merkel. And of course, she's no longer the chancellor of Germany. She's been out of power, more than a year now. So really, I think if I say that Narendra Modi is the, by far the most august, respected leader in the free world, I'm not kissing up to Mr. Modi. I'm not exaggerating. I'm just stating a fact. And I would challenge anyone to tell me, if not Narendra Modi, then who?
Point. Yeah. He also met some people who have, the Hiroshima Nagasaki people when he was, he meets leading Japanese personality in Hiroshima. What was he trying to say when he met personalities? What he's trying to put across sympathies, understanding, like what? Because yeah.
Look, I didn't follow the events in Hiroshima, so I do apologize for that. I'm not really well briefed on how the G7 and the Quad meetings went and his public relations he did in Japan. I mean, here in Australia, of course, he met many leading figures, including figures from the Indian Australian community. I have to say, you said that I went viral. Nothing like as much as, and I'm sorry I don't know their names. There was a chef from Goa who her meeting with Modi went far more viral than mine, and a famous singer apparently who he met with had his photo taken with. So they're the real celebrities. We academics can't hold a candle to a celebrity chef or a celebrity singer.
Would you like to add any other point that just touched you or you came across while you were meeting him, or something special or unique that happened?
Look, I think it's important for people to realize that although in India, everyone is going to be seeing Mr. Modi as a politician, he is also a leader. That is, he's also the prime minister, right? He's not only the head of a party and a politician, he's also the head of government in India. And here in Australia, that's how he's received, that's how he's respected. When he talked to me, he wasn't talking to me as a politician trying to win an election. That's for back in India. Right. I mean, and I know in India, of course, he's always, people say that politics is on his mind, 25 hours a day. Maybe that's true. But here in Australia, he was talking all about India, not about politics. So whether that's meeting with me, we didn't have a conversation about his image, right? He never raised that question. I mean, our conversation was not about his image. Our conversation was about getting an accurate narrative out for India. In the same way, meeting with the diaspora is valuable, not as voters. I mean, most of the diaspora are citizens here in Australia. They've given up their Indian citizenship. They're valuable as people who can help navigate Australian investment into India, who can help bring development to India. So, yes, he's here trying to be charming and trying to, make everyone smile here in the diaspora. But why does he care so much about the diaspora? They're not going to vote for him. He cares so much about the diaspora because they're going to help bring development to India. So I just, I 100% had the feeling that he wasn't here, even holding a big rally in a stadium, that wasn't here as a political rally. He was here as a rally for India. And I think in that he was incredibly successful.
Right. So before we end this, the last question: what do Australians think about India and Modi?
It
Normal
is
Australians.
a yeah. I mean, it is a divided conversation, and that's why I did want to have that op-ed in the newspaper talking about the need to be data driven, because each newspaper carried a different story. Financial Review carried my piece about the need to be data driven. The Australian newspaper went with the security relationship, and on the one hand, they applauded Mr. Modi for wanting closer bilateral security ties with Australia. On the other hand, they criticized Mr. Modi and India for not condemning Russia's, or not condemning in sufficiently strong language, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Sydney Morning Herald's editorial focused on their perceptions of human rights abuses in India. So there's not, there's a lot of work to do in Australia to create a better knowledge of India. Australians at this point aren't sure what to think. They know that India is in their future. They know that China, the big China boom's over. They know that India is their biggest, fastest growing neighbor. They know that India is becoming, or has become, the largest, non-British diaspora community in Australia. They're not yet sure what to make of that. And that education mission is something that I'm really eager to take on, that I'm enjoying being in that role of helping educate Australians about India. I mean, Indians seem to see me as someone who's come from Oz, to intervene in India's conversations. I never had any intention of trying to educate Indians. All of my work on India the last 5 years has been on educating Australians and Westerners about India. Now, if Indians want to listen in on that conversation, I'm very happy to talk to Indians. But the people who need to learn about India are not Indians. The people who need to learn about Indians are Westerners. And I hope I can be part of that education mission. After all, I am an academic. This is what I do. I educate, and I'm just thrilled to be part of that program.
Just one last 1 minute. How big is the threat of Khalistanis? I'm sure you've heard of Khalistanis in
Yeah, of
Australia.
course, yeah. Look, I don't think it's today. It's certainly not on the scale that it is in Canada. It's a nascent movement in Australia. It does seem to be growing. There is serious mobilization happening in gurdwaras in Australia. I don't have sufficiently deep contacts in the Sikh community to know how widespread it is. Also, I think it's important to realize that just because a Sikh expresses moral support for the idea of Khalistan, doesn't mean that Sikh actually wants practical action to have a revolution in Punjab. Right. And there's that, I think in India, there's an assumption that these go together because the leaders of the Khalistan movement want that to happen. But don't necessarily think that all those people who are showing up to participate in the Khalistan referendum, for many of them, I think they're just being part of the community. Right. I don't think they're necessarily actually militants wanting to support separatism in India. So there is a Khalistan movement here. It's hard to gauge just how much traction it has at the grassroots level. I certainly know, well, the Sikhs I personally know in Australia don't support the Khalistan movement, so the support is certainly not universal. How deep it is, well, we would need a serious research project to find out.
And Modi's visit might have some kind of positive impact in bringing those ones who are supporting this movement, I guess.
It's hard to tell because it's hard to tell how committed people are. I mean, the Khalistan referendums, so-called referendums that have been held, while they're portrayed in the social media as actually a referendum on Khalistan, I visited the one in Brisbane, and the one in Brisbane was much more, a Sikh Punjabi community event at which they had this referendum. Right, they're very much trying to piggyback on the community to claim, I think, much more support than they actually have. And this is a tactic that activists use all over the world for all sorts of causes. Trying to claim that people who are really just coming for the picnic. And yes,
Coming
there's a
for picnic,
Khalistan
so they say
poster.
they put, okay, they're coming for the referendum.
Yeah, well, you put the poster on it and everything, but the people are there for the picnic, right? They're not there for the Khalistan. Now, I don't know how much that is true. I don't have those connections. I don't speak Punjabi. I'm not Sikh, but that's my overall impression.
Thank you so much, Salvatore, for joining us. And congratulations once again for meeting Narendra Modi. In fact, I am one who's, kind of dreaming to meet him one day. So thank you so much for joining. Jaane se pehle sabhi viewers se request hai, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share the alternate media. You want to support us, you want to contribute, you want to criticize, you want to appreciate. All the links are given in the description box. Jai Hind, Jai Shri Ram, Har Har Mahadev. Thank you so much.
Thank you.